if they view themselves over you, they view themselves over you in every aspect. Nothing in your life should matter more than them. And they will test that. So narcissists love to call people on the weekends and in the evenings, after hours. Also one of their classic things to do. Texting and phone calls are going to be the classic tools of a narcissist. And because they can use those, they don't quite have the formality of an email, not quite the same trackability of an email. And they love to do that after hours. They love to ping people late at night, on the weekends. And in addition to that, they don't follow chain of command. This is the Leadership Foundry podcast. I'm your host this week, Brandon Smith. And joining me this week is my amazing producer, Whitney Mendoza. Whitney, how are you today?
Great, Brandon. How are you?
Doing all right, Whitney. I'm doing all right. I'm excited for our topic today in this way. I seem to keep getting asked by people this particular question, typically about their leader. Sometimes it's a coworker, but usually about their direct supervisor, their manager, their CEO, whoever they happen to report to. And the question that I keep getting asked is this person a narcissist? And how can I tell? And so we've heard lots around that term gets thrown around a lot. Oh, that leader's a narcissist. That person's a narcissist. They're just being narcissistic. And it's fun to label folks that way, but it's not always the case. Not everybody, just because they're dysfunctional doesn't necessarily make them narcissistic. So I thought today would be helpful for me to provide everyone listening here today your checklist of the 5 signs you're dealing with a narcissist. And so you don't have to necessarily hit all 5, but if you hit maybe 4 out of 5, you've got an interesting challenge on your hands. Let's say that. So if there's a little bit of time at the end, I can offer some strategies for managing, coping, addressing a narcissist. But I think the most important first step is that we identify the signs. So do we even know what we're dealing with here? So that's going to be our topic here today.
I'm excited, Brent. Yeah, I was kind of thinking when you were talking about if you hit 4 out of the 5, like that's starting to get dangerously close.
Yeah, dangerously close. Absolutely. So I've got 5 here. They're no particular order. So I'll do each one. You and I can talk about them, and then we'll see what time we've got left. If there's time for some strategies.
Let's hope so. That will redeem us today.
Yes, we'll see if there's any kind of redeeming we can do, but at least folks will know what they got. So our first number 1 sign is somewhat true for anyone who's dysfunctional. So if you came to a pharmacy, let's say you came to my pharmacy and you said, Brandon, I need a prescription for coping with a dysfunctional coworker or dysfunctional leader. Okay, so depending upon the flavor and tone and tenor of that dysfunction, it may or may not be narcissist, could be something else. But regardless of whether it's narcissist or something else, the prescription I'm going to give you is always going to include clarity, driving clarity. Because our first sign we're dealing with a narcissist, they despise clarity. They will not be clear on their expectations. They'll make it sound like they're being clear, but they're not going to be clear. So they're going to say, you need to be more strategic. That will be their version of clarity. So when you first hear that from your leader, you're going to say, okay, they want me to be more strategic. But if you unpack what they just told you, what does that mean? It means nothing. It is absolutely a vague, amorphous comment. And the reason why narcissists love lack of clarity, vagueness, and ambiguity is because 2 things they can do in that world. First, they can gaslight. They can say, I never said that to you. I have no idea what you're talking about. Okay. First, they can do that. Second, more importantly, they can say, you guessed wrong. It's all your fault, because they always need somebody else to point to. So they can go off and tell their team, you all need to be more strategic. And the team works really hard and pulls some all-nighters, and they pull together a big strategic plan. The narcissist can come back and say, this is not what I was talking about at all. I don't know what you all have been doing. You've been wasting your time. So that lack of clarity is one of the hallmarks of a narcissist. So more specifically, some of the subtler tactics you'll see them do, they really do not like to put what they expect from others in email. So we know as good managers and leaders, clarity is our first step. We need to be very clear around roles, goals, expectations, culture. Narcissists are not going to do that because they use that ambiguity and vagueness to their advantage, as I mentioned before. So they're not going to send you an email saying, this is what you need to do. And if you send an email to them saying, this is what I intend to do, you probably aren't going to get a response. In general, narcissists hate emails because they hate email trails, because that can be pulled back later and be shown to them and said, you typed this. So they much prefer phone calls and hallway conversations because there's not some kind of a history or trail or recording of that evidence. So they can kind of repaint that later and say, I never said that. That's not what I meant, or you misinterpreted that. So that's our first step. They really, really do not like clarity. So if you have a leader right now that you just can't seem to pin her or him down on exactly what they want, particularly around kind of our commander's intent, which we've talked about before in the past, the why, the what, the when, if they're not really clear on exactly what they're asking for and they give you kind of vague generalities, you want to try and drive clarity as best you can. But that's our first sign. So Whitney, I'll pause there. Any thoughts or reactions from you?
I had one specific to this, which I may be jumping ahead. So if I am, Brandon, be like, pause, Whitney, because we're going to go through the other 4 signs. Gaslighting. Can gaslighting be used more as a tactic outside of that individual necessarily being a narcissist?
Yes, gaslighting can absolutely be used without the person being a narcissist. So it's one of the common techniques used when we're dealing in dysfunctional relationships or dysfunctional individuals is that they can gaslight. And gaslighting is essentially playing off of this lack of clarity. I never said that. That's not what we talked about. I don't know what you're talking about. Those are all classic gaslighting kind of phrases. And so in order to avoid that and prevent it, you have to drive clarity. And so I always recommend getting the other person, getting them to either say it, or more importantly, getting them to write it in email or summarize the meeting later and say, hey, as we discussed, here are the things I'm going to do. Let me know if I need to make any adjustments. So you're driving clarity, because the more clarity we can drive, it creates a little more of a clearer box that can't maneuver around it. And just so we're clear, the reason why they gaslight is they gaslight for 2 reasons. One, so they can never take blame. Okay, narcissists do not ever want to be in the spotlight for blame. Okay, they're highly insecure, so they don't ever want to be taking blame. The second is because they're trying to get you feeling insecure. They're getting you questioning yourself. Maybe I did understand that. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I did do this wrong. It's all my fault. Because when they do that, they create insecurity in you. And then they by doing that, they're strengthening their own power position over you. So it's all about the power dynamic. And because insecurity, rides shotgun for narcissists, they are deeply insecure people. They try and push that into other people so they can be the least insecure of the insecure bunch. So that's one of the big reasons why they do it. So yeah, you don't necessarily have to be a narcissist to use gaslighting, but it is a hallmark of that bunch.
Well, I'm really glad you snuck in like a little tip of how to deal with the narcissist in there, because what I hear you say as well is if you do get caught on the phone or in the hallway with the narcissist, to kind of immediately go back to your desk and send an email summarizing what you just heard and the action steps.
Yep. And tell them you're going to do that. I'm going to go back to my desk, summarize what we talked about, and send you an email. If you have any questions about that, please let me know, or anything you'd like me to clarify, edit, or amend. So, which they will not like. But again, if they don't respond, you can say, hey, I sent it. You didn't say anything. We agreed. That was you blessing it going forward. So you have to be really, really on your game in terms of driving clarity and hold their feet to the fire. They are a very squirrely bunch indeed.
Sure. All right. What's sign number 2?
Okay. Again, in no particular order, sign number 2, they do not respect boundaries. Ooh. They don't respect boundaries. So there are no boundaries with a narcissist. They believe they are above boundaries, and that because they view the world in a very vertical way, if they view themselves over you, they view themselves over you in every aspect. Nothing in your life should matter more than them. And they will test that. So narcissists love to call people on the weekends and in the evenings, after hours. Also one of their classic things to do. Texting and phone calls are going to be the classic tools of a narcissist. And because they can use those, they don't quite have the formality of an email, not quite the same trackability of an email. And they love to do that after hours. They love to ping people late at night, on the weekends. And in addition to that, they don't follow chain of command. So they don't want you to have that kind of, if you're a manager or any kind of managerial responsibilities, they don't want you having that supervisory authority or leadership authority over your people. They want to compromise that as best they can and show the person that they're really reporting to them. So they'll call your direct reports and ask them to do work and not tell you what they ask them to do. And you'll have to find out later from your direct report. Oh yeah, so-and-so called me and asked me to do this thing. And the narcissist won't feel anything is wrong with that. They don't like chain of command. They won't follow chain of command, and they definitely will not keep to boundaries. So when you have kind of work-life balance kind of requests, or you set those boundaries, hey, I've got an anniversary, and that's the other thing you want to be careful about too. They may actually try and intentionally, they'll make it look like they're not, but intentionally poke and prod on some big holidays and events you've got boundaries for. Like a last minute request that might interfere with your anniversary dinner, or a last minute ask that's going to interfere with that soccer game you promised your kids you'd go to. They'll make it act like it's an emergency, but they want to show you and see if you will abide by their authority and their power over things that you say are really important to you. So we got to be careful with that. So that's our second one. Our second test, they really do not respect boundaries and won't honor yours.
So where do these narcissists hide, Brandon? Because it almost sounds like if they don't really go for a chain of command, somehow they claw their way to the top. Maybe they're just decide they're going to be an entrepreneur. They want to be a business owner so that they, never have the chance to have someone above them. And of course, that means they can go out and hire people and everyone is below them. Where do you typically find these narcissists?
Well, they can be CEOs. It's a little tricky to be a CEO of a big publicly traded company because you have to work with peers. So the other important point to remember in narcissist life, in their world, the way their worldview works is they only see things vertically. You are not a peer. There's no peers. You either have more power than them and they need to woo you, or you have less power than them and they can stomp all over you. So I remember Randy and I were working with a narcissist, not to name any names. And the narcissist really knew Randy and respected Randy. And so I'm Randy's partner. He completely ignored me, walked right past me, ignored me, wouldn't make eye contact. I'm standing right next to Randy. We're both having a conversation with this person. He wouldn't even look at me. He was like, you work with Randy. I respect you, shouldn't even be in the room. It was an interesting kind of dynamic. I wasn't offended by it, but I was very curious about how they operate. So I say that because they're really, because they view the world vertically, they understand power. And when they think someone has more power than them, they're very good at wooing them, which means they're very good at sales. And they're very good at kind of getting people in powerful positions to like them and see them as valuable. The other thing they're very good at is kind of painting pictures and creating kind of stories. So what'll happen is the entire team will do all this great work. The narcissist will figure out a way to come into that meeting and take credit for all of it. And so people say, wow, we like this guy or gal. And look at all that they've gotten accomplished. It's clearly all because of them. So they're very, very good at that. So if you're an entrepreneur, that's great because you're selling to customers and they're typically the kind of the point person doing all the selling. If you're in a corporation and you're trying to get promotions, it's easy for you to kind of elbow yourself, around your peers because they're not afraid to self-promote. at all. Narcissists are great self-promoters. And so they can move up pretty well. Where you often see narcissists in Fortune 500 companies is they don't stay in one very long. They get found out, and when they know they're about to get found out, they hop to another one. So you could see a narcissist in a very senior role in your business, but if you look back on their LinkedIn history, you're going to see that they shift jobs every 5 years, shift companies every 5 years. And it's typically because their smoke screens and a lot of their techniques are no longer working as well as they want them to, and so they have to hop over. So those are some common places you find them in the land of entrepreneurship and in some big kind of senior roles, but they don't stay in those senior roles very long.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. What's our point number 3?
Okay, so we've got 2 down. So our first one, just as a reminder, they hate clarity. They don't follow boundaries. Okay, those are our first 2. Our third one is they do not receive negative feedback of any kind at all whatsoever. So we often talk about great leaders are open to feedback, and they are, because that's a form of humility and it's a way for you to make adjustments so you can get better. Narcissists do not do negative feedback because deep down they are highly insecure. So if you provide them any kind of feedback, they are not going to respond well. They're going to get very agitated, noticeably agitated, might even throw a temper tantrum. In the cases where I've seen narcissists receive feedback that was less than positive, they shut down like a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, and we're just pouting. Sat there in a corner, wouldn't talk. So they don't expect any kind of open feedback. So if you've got a leader that just refuses negative feedback, doesn't want to hear any kind of feedback about them, happy to hear it about you because they want other people to be less than perfect so they can point out those imperfections and really drive insecurity. But they're not going to be open to feedback. So surveys, even 360 feedback is probably not a common thing I often get. So I don't, I typically, in the case of my work as an executive coach, I don't end up working with a lot of narcissists directly because they don't want the 360 feedback. They don't want to go through the process. It feels vulnerable to them, and they're afraid I'm going to see them for who they really are. So they're going to avoid that. But my clients often have a narcissist, not often, but sometimes have a narcissist within their ecosystem. And it's usually their direct leader. And so then navigating that individual in my work with my clients is often a challenge. So if you're dealing with a narcissist, just know she or he's not going to want to hear negative feedback. They want to hear how things are rosy and wonderful and great as it relates to them. All the time.
That feels like it points back. That's an interesting connection to point number 2 of going back to boundaries and the fact that they change positions so often because it's like they know the radar, right? They've done this a couple of times. And so they start to feel the heat when they know something's going on and I'm about to be found out. So I'm just going to jump ship before I completely sink my own ship. I mean, they're sinking their own ship. And so they jump and leave everyone else on it, it seems.
Yeah. And notice it's all about manipulating other people, not actually about results. So they can figure out how to drive results by tapping into other people's insecurities and getting them to work really, really hard. And so they can inadvertently create results, but there's not much behind them that's doing it, other than driving a lot of fear and anxiety and getting results through those measures. They're not doing it through inspiration. They're not doing it through casting a great vision or leading a really high-performing culture or an inclusive culture or psychologically safe culture. They're not doing any of that. They're just tapping into people's insecurities and fears and anxieties and then getting results through that. So it's interesting that you can operate that way and still be somewhat, I don't know, I wouldn't say successful, but you could survive a long time doing that. Let's put it that way.
Does this play into, because there's a theme here, Brandon, I'm sensing all these points point back to the other, right? That chain of command, if they're at the top, essentially calling the shots, it sounds like to me that that plays a factor in who they hire, because in order to gaslight and really manipulate, you have to have someone who essentially allows you to do that for a period of time.
Yes. And they're very skilled. So unless you are on your guard and you know you're being manipulated, if you give the narcissist the benefit of the doubt and say, well, gosh, they are my vice president, and wow, they really are accomplished, they're probably right. If you start doing that, then you've lost.
Wow.
So you just have to really be in tune to the cues that we're talking about here today, so you know how to properly set up your really set up your armor and your defenses so they don't completely take over. And I've seen some really, really confident, strong people be brought down pretty quickly by a skilled narcissist. So it's also important you're dealing with people that are highly, highly skilled. So I'll go back in time a little bit. So there's a tool used for mental illness diagnosis. Okay, I've got it right behind me. This is an older version of it. It's the DSM-4. I think they're up to 5 or 6 at this point. And so in the older book, there's a section on it's called Axis 2. It's all personality disorders. It's narcissists. It's sociopaths. It's borderline personality disorder. It's dissociative personality disorder. It's all the real nasties. And what makes this group particularly challenging is 2 things. They are highly, highly skilled at manipulating using emotion. Okay. They know how to use emotion and know how to tap into it and use it to get what they want. And 2, there isn't really a treatment for it. So the only way that folks who kind of fall within those categories make progress is by wanting to change on their own and doing deep work with a therapist. You can't give a medication to kind of fix it. You can numb it, but you can't fix it. And if your therapist working with one of those individuals, you don't ever really know if they're making progress or if they're just gaming the system, because they use their EQ and their connection to emotions to know exactly what you're looking for and know what words to say to try and trick you into thinking they're actually following what you're asking for. So it's just a good reminder for us that we're dealing with a very, very skilled entity here when we talk about narcissists, just like all those other individuals or labels that I gave you a little bit earlier.
Yeah, it sounds like I was thinking when you were saying that they actually want to change. That's probably hard to pinpoint, because it sounds like the narcissist thinks they know everything and everyone else is the one who needs to change.
Well, and that's the problem. Well, they're deeply insecure, so they don't ever really want to look at themselves. They want to create the image and perception that they're changing so that you admire them. So they would love it if you were the therapist for you to say, wow, I've never ever had a client that has made as much change in such a short period of time as you. That's what they're going for. They're going for this, you are amazing, unlike anybody else I've ever seen. So it's more about the game and manipulation than it is actually self-reflection and real personal growth. Those aren't not in the vocabulary of narcissists. They're not interested in either of those things.
Wow. I'm a little bit scared, but what is sign number 4?
So I just actually hinted at it. Image is number 1. That's all that matters to a narcissist is image. Okay. Optics and image as it relates to them and only them. So the business can have poor image as long as they are seen as the saviors, or they're seen as doing all the right thing. It was someone else's fault. So their image is number 1. And so why does that matter? It means when you bring a narcissist a piece of work that you're working on and ask them for feedback, they're probably just going to ignore you and ignore it. They've got bigger things to do than that. However, if you bring them something that you're going to then present to the board, they are going to very much care about that and micromanage the heck out of that, because they want to really make sure that you don't say anything that's going to put them in hot water or make it look like they're not doing their job. So they're very, very concerned about that. So you'll find two things will happen with narcissists, which are not good leadership. One, they're going to want you to sugarcoat as much as possible if you're making any kind of public statements or even just acknowledging things going on in the business in a town hall. They're going to really want you to scrub that. They want only good news as it relates to them. Two, they're going to avoid any kind of important critical decisions or discussions that need to be had if it potentially makes them look bad. Okay, so they'll avoid what needs to be done or what should be done if it's going to make them look bad. So you'll see them kind of avoiding those kinds of things. So often a lot of ownership that we often talk about. We talk about author and editor. The traits of the author is ownership, initiative, and critical thinking. They're going to avoid ownership in a lot of situations because they don't want the potential that something could blow up and make them look bad. However, if something turned out well, you're going to see them be the first one in the parade saying that, thank you, everybody. I'm so thankful that you all are appreciating me. And of course, all the little people behind me that did some of the work, but mostly me. And so they are going to be quick to take credit. They're going to act like they do it in a very humble way. But you'll see they'll be first in line to take credit. But when things don't go well, their finger will be up and pointing somewhere else. So as a quick strategy and tip, if you've got a narcissist that you're dealing with as a leader, if you're wanting a survival mechanism, make sure every time you go in and talk to her or him, you're giving them good news. Oh, I want to tell you, I heard someone talking about how amazing you are as a leader, or I heard someone commenting about how impressed they were with how you ran that town hall, or I'm really thrilled to give you this great news that you can share with other people. So it's kind of the emperor with no clothes. You really want to make sure that they think they look great all the time. And if they think they look great all the time, when they spend time with you, they're more likely to leave you alone. So it's a good survival mechanism, not necessarily healthy or ideal, but healthy and ideal is not going to be the standard that we're operating with a narcissist. There's nothing anyone listening to this can do that is going to change a narcissist from being a narcissist. They're probably too far gone in general, even in their own life. They're probably never going to change. And I'm big on hoping people change and believing that people can change. Not likely a narcissist. The amount of work and self-reflection they're going to have to do is so intense. They're probably too far gone. So don't think you can change one. You really just need to figure out how to survive the best you can so you don't become collateral damage, because they leave a lot of collateral damage behind them.
That was going to be one of my follow-up questions to this section. What happens if you make a narcissist mad? What if you get on the wrong side of this relationship?
Whitney, you just set up number 5. Okay. All right. So just as a reminder, everybody, they hate clarity. That's number 1. In addition to hating clarity, they really don't respect boundaries. That's number 2. Number 3, they do not take negative feedback at all in any form. Okay. You'll see an emotional reaction for them. They won't get curious. They'll get very defensive and operate more like a 5 or 6-year-old kind of mentality. Number 4, they, as we've just talked about, the image is number 1 priority. It's all about how they look and appear. That's going to be their central focus. And then number 5, someone always has to be the golden child and someone always has to be bad. So you will always find, talking to a narcissist, that they will have someone that they lift up on their team that is amazing. And then they're going to have someone that they're about to fire. And they'll tell you, they'll be like, oh, that Brandon, he's the problem. He really is the problem. I've been doing a lot of work on the team and he's the problem. I actually think we need to let him go. I've been having some tough conversations with him, but I'm not hopeful. I think we're probably going to have to let him go in the next 3 months. And this is the stuff they'll tell someone at like the cashier at the grocery. They'll tell anybody this. So it's not like they hold that kind of commentary or that bad mouthing of other people in any kind of confidence. Anybody who asks them, they will tell you, because they're trying to point a finger at somebody else. So you don't ever want to be the one who's bad, because they're going to put a lot of heat on you, and they're going to tell everybody about how bad you are. They're going to want everybody looking at you, blaming you for everything. And then they're going to strike this fine balance of wanting to keep you along for as long as they can because they have a scapegoat. But ultimately, they want to fire you because that's how they show everybody that you were the problem and it wasn't them. So on the flip side, then there's the golden child who can do no wrong. You don't want to be the golden child. That's almost a worse position, because the problem with the golden child is as soon as the golden child makes one misstep, one bad presentation, one comment from a board member that they don't believe in the golden child, just one anything that's not perfect, you go from golden child to the one who's bad overnight. You drop all the way down to the bottom of the list. And then the narcissist says, yeah, I know we were talking about how great Brandon was, but now I've been working with him a little while. I actually realize I don't think he's actually as good as everyone thinks he is. In fact, I actually think he might be the problem. So you really want to be careful there. They view people as black and white, good or bad, and then or in the middle, which is you're not a person. You're just a tool to be used. But the good and the bad, they use the good and the bad to constantly redirect the attention, so it's not put on them. So the best strategy to survive in this is don't be the best. Don't try and be the right-hand person to your narcissist. That's a very, very, very tenuous position to be in. And of course, you want to avoid the bad. So you can avoid those things by doing good work. Don't over communicate. Don't over invest. And every time you do spend time with a narcissist, deliver good news. Always be delivering good news. But generally, try and keep your distance, because you'll have other folks that get close enough that they'll get the title of the golden child or the one who is bad.
So what do relationships look like for these people, Brandon? Because I'm almost thinking, of past episodes we've done before of scary workplace coworkers. And I don't remember if we gave the narcissist a persona, because it almost feels like it could be a mesh of the werewolf that's constantly changing, the vampire that's sucking all the life out of you. It's almost like this six-headed monster.
Yeah. Relationships are all transactional, highly transactional. Narcissists will be married and they may have children, but those relationships are very dominant, submissive kind of relationships. If they're going to be in any kind of relationship, it's going to be all about them all the time. So there's no real intimacy. They don't come alongside anybody. They cannot have a relationship that is predicated on empathy, compassion, curiosity, compromise, communication, all the other things candor, a lot of the things that Randy and I talk about, all those things that start with the letter C. They don't do any of those things well. So typically in a narcissist's personal life, the narcissist will be running off doing their narcissistic thing, and the spouse has learned that they're off doing their own thing. They've got their own life. They do their own thing. And sometimes and then they come together, or, on a weekend or whatever, and they've got kids, but there's no real intimacy there. So that's personal life. Now in professional life, it's that, but just more couched within the context of a workplace. Very transactional. What have you done for me lately? And they're always going to be trying to poke and prod at your confidence to make you feel like you're insecure and they're better than you. So you need them, so that you keep wanting to please them. That's where their power lies. So they want people to worship them and always wanting to please them, because then that's how they kind of get and keep their followers. And some people can, do that for a long time. Other people, they run out of patience. The other thing you got to be careful about with narcissists in companies is what they'll do is if they're in a company and they have any kind of authority over equity in the company or bonuses, they'll throw out big equity kind of promises and big bonus promises for down the road so you don't leave. And then once you agree to that and you get excited, then they just absolutely just turn on the screws of trying to drive that insecurity and just really do all their techniques because they feel like they've got you. And you won't want to leave because you want to hold on to that promise of the golden parachute. And by the way, because they're so skilled with smoke screens, you'll notice the goal line keeps moving. It's first quarter. Now it's the end of second quarter. Now it's the end of third quarter. It's been a bad year. We're going to wait till next year. And pretty soon they've dragged you on for another 18 months where they just kind of get to beat you up and keep you around. So again, because they're not, you can see how all these tie together. They don't promise and drive clarity. Don't like to be held accountable to a date. So they use that. So you think they've committed. They haven't committed. Narcissists don't commit. That's another word that begins with the letter C that they don't do. They don't actually commit to anybody or anything. The only thing they're committed to is themselves, and gaining and preserving their position of power. And I will say this, while narcissists care about money, that's not their driver. What they care more about is that position of power. That's what they want. So you can see narcissists in all different kinds of walks of life, some that have a lot of money attached to it, some that don't. But they want that. They want to be admired, revered, but mostly in that position of power. So just one more thought for us today as we try and nail down our narcissistic challenges.
This is fascinating to me because the way people work has always been interesting to me. So I have a million other questions I could ask, but if we could go back to like not being the golden child, right? Like I envision maybe a junior employee, a junior team member that wants to be with the company long term, work their way up the ladder, but it almost sounds like that would be counterintuitive if their boss is a narcissist. Like, what's the best way to navigate this if you are dealing with a narcissist in the workplace?
Okay, so two different kind of ways we can look at this. You're an employee in a company. Your boss is the narcissist. Your boss's boss is the narcissist. Okay, so two different strategies. Okay, so if your boss is the narcissist, the problem is going to be no matter how good a work you do, they will always take credit for it. And they in back rooms when you're not there, they'll say things like, well, Wendy's pretty good. I've had to work with her a lot though, just so you all know. She's really come a long way and she's delivering pretty good work right now, but there has been tremendous amount of work on my end. And in fact, there was a period of time I wasn't quite sure if she was going to make it. They do those kinds of things so that no one outside of their team or area tries to pick you off and take you away. They want to keep you and keep control of you and don't want any spotlight hitting your way. They want it all on them. So they will actually limit their team members' promotion opportunities because they want to keep that intact, insecure team because that's how they get their results. So if you are in that position and you find that you're working directly for a narcissist, keep bringing them good news, keep them happy. You don't want to upset them because the more you upset them, the more they're going to spread bad rumors about you in other meetings they're in. They are really good at damaging brand of other people when they're in meetings when those people aren't there. They do a lot of subtle comments and digs to make it look like those people aren't that good. Just like I kind of gave that example. So you want to keep them happy, always bring good news, and then work your back channels to get yourself moved into another department, get another leader, transfer, find another way to do that. And hopefully you can do it within the same company, but you might need to leave because the longer you stay with a narcissist, it's going to limit your promotion opportunities. B, they're going to beat down on your own self-confidence. So you want to be careful there. So the other situation would be your boss's boss is a narcissist. Okay, so then give your direct leader lots of compassion and care for what they're dealing with. Be a good listening ear to them because they are now in that position where they're dealing with their director boss who's saying bad things about them behind their backs and not giving them the credit they deserve, and they're kind of really close to the line of fire. So provide your boss that extra ear and support. The other challenge is just keep yourself low visibility. You don't want to get the attention of a narcissist and just wait them out. I don't see, unless the narcissist owns the business, they typically don't last more than 3 to 5 years. They implode. They make some kind of misstep because they believe that they are bigger and better than everything around them, including all the rules, by the way. They break lots of rules. They don't abide to any kind of morals, ethics, or laws. They don't. They just do whatever is in their best interest. Now, they understand those three realms really well because they don't want to damage their image, but they don't respect any of those three. They have no real sense of morals, no real sense of professional ethics, and laws are for everybody else, not for them. So eventually they're going to get caught. Okay. So if it's the owner of the business, then you probably just need to go find another home, or hope that they sell the business. But you'll notice that even when they sell the business, they'll expect to stay on and continue to do what they're doing. The new owners will eventually exit them, and it will be nasty because the narcissist who sold the business is going to for anything and everything that goes wrong just because they didn't want to lose power and they wanted the money. So I would say those are two different strategies in terms of how you might handle those situations.
Yeah. Well, this has been great, Brandon, and very much needed. And thanks for your insight and providing these 5 points.
Again, it's come up because so many of my clients have been asking the question of, am I dealing with a narcissist? Sometimes they are, but most often they're not. So I would say of the list of 5 that I gave you, so I'll summarize the list one more time and then we'll kind of wrap up. Narcissists really will not do clarity. They're not going to be clear on what they expect. They will never put anything in writing. They really, really hate doing that. Second, there's going to be no real following of boundaries. They're not going to honor boundaries. They're going to send you lots of texts or phone calls in off hours, evenings, weekends. And they'll go direct to your direct reports. They're not going to go through you first. No chain of command, no boundaries. Third, they do not receive negative feedback. They refuse to hear it. Anything that might be incriminating or a development opportunity for them, you will see them shut down and operate out of kind of a 5 to 7 year old kind of place, because that's actually how old a narcissist really is. They're in that bullying kind of stage of life. So they'll shut down. That's number 3. Number 4, image is number 1 priority. It's all about how they look. They don't want to look bad. And then finally, number 5, someone's got to be good. Someone's got to be bad. And you don't want to be in either of those seats. So I would say for anyone listening to this, if you got 4 out of 5 of those, you are dealing with a pretty well-established narcissist. If you're dealing with all 5, you might want to look for another home. That might be your best strategy. And our final takeaway is, in everything I just listed, if you want to be a great leader, do the opposite of all those things. Drive clarity. That can be our first one. Make sure we're driving clarity. Make sure that we do respect people's boundaries, and we're trying to really do a good job of honoring people's work-life balance. Be open to feedback. Be open to how you can get better, and don't treat it as a scary thing or be defensive. Be really focused on what's the right thing to do and not worried so much about your own image, and really let the spotlight move around your team, platform your whole team, let the spotlight go to others. And then finally, we don't need people to be good or bad. Everybody can have the opportunity to be great on our team, and just really make sure that we're recognizing folks and giving people the benefit of the doubt, giving people grace and compassion, and giving them everything we can to make them as successful as they can be. So we can do the opposite of all these things and be great. So I would end it with there. And with all of our Leadership Foundry podcasts, the goal for today is for you to just take away maybe one or 2 things you can put into your toolkit, either to protect you from maybe a narcissist, or make you a better leader for your team today, so your team can really thrive tomorrow.